If there's one thing the Galactic Council loves more than endless committee meetings, it's making up new rules for everyone else to follow. When humanity finally stumbled onto the galactic stage, still picking pieces of our first FTL drive from between our teeth, we were handed a 12,000-page welcome packet. Most of it was just liability waivers, but buried somewhere around page 452, was the Universal Respect for Cultural and Religious Traditions clause. No one actually read it, well, except for some poor intern at the State Department, who promptly had a nervous breakdown and started a new life raising space goats on Proxima Centauri b. Which is how Mack Reynolds, a career diplomat whose greatest aspiration was a quiet desk job processing trade agreements, became Earth's first cross-species cultural attaché, or, as he liked to call it, otherworldly babysitter to the stars. "Let me get this straight," Mack said, squinting at his supervisor across a desk cluttered with alien paperwork. "We signed a binding agreement promising to respect all alien religious traditions when practiced on Earth?" Ambassador Jenkins nodded solemnly. "And vice versa. The Council insists on perfect cultural reciprocity. We don't even understand most of these species. The Zorbi worship black holes, for God's sake. What if their tradition involves creating one?" "That would fall under our pre-existing no-planet-destroying activities clause," Jenkins replied with practiced diplomatic smoothness. "Look, Reynolds, this job is simple. You facilitate, you accommodate, you make sure nobody declares interstellar war over a misunderstanding about bathroom etiquette." Mack massaged his temples. "When I joined the diplomatic corps, I thought I'd be attending fancy parties and eating those little appetizers on toothpicks." "There will be appetizers," Jenkins assured him. "Some might even try to eat you. Cultural sensitivity, Reynolds. That's what we're aiming for." As Mack trudged back to his office, a converted broom closet with cross-species cultural attaché written on the door in both English and Standard Galactic, his communication implant chimed. A message from the Galactic Council marked urgent. "Oh, good," Mack muttered. "Just what my Monday needed." Mack stared at the holographic message floating above his desk, reading it for the 5th time in the vain hope that the words might rearrange themselves into something less terrifying. "Miraco sum shima mundi" comes after Wardum. "Wardum" comes after seeking rest. "Profess" seeks Earth attendance at Comic-Con ceremony. Below was a brief description that made Mack's blood run cold. Gorr'magog, the Eviscerator of Worlds, the 13-limbed horror, he who bathes in the blood of 1,000 species, would like to attend your San Diego Comic-Con International. As per Section 87.3b of the Universal Respect for Cultural and Religious Traditions Agreement, we expect full accommodations for his divine terribleness. A ritual space of no less than 10,000 square feet should be prepared. Note: Gorr'magog travels with his traditional weapons of soul harvest, which are exempt from your primitive weapons restrictions as they are religious artifacts. Mack's communication implant chimed again. Ambassador Jenkins. "Reynolds, have you seen the request?" Jenkins's voice was strained. "Yes, sir. I'm trying to understand why a literal war god wants to attend Comic-Con. That's precisely what you need to find out, without offending an entity that once allegedly devoured a small moon because someone looked at him funny. Sir, the Krull'thak are one of the most aggressive species in the galaxy. Their whole religion is based on conquest. What if this is some kind of... The Council has already approved the visit under the Tradition Clause," Jenkins cut in. "We are bound by interstellar law. Find out what he wants at Comic-Con and make it happen." After Jenkins disconnected, Max slumped back in his chair. "Comic-Con! Of all the human cultural events, why that one?" He pulled up information on the Krull'thak. 8-foot-tall reptilian humanoids with chitinous armor and multiple limbs. Their civilization had conquered dozens of worlds before joining the Galactic Council, and their religion centered around Gorr'magog, a deity who supposedly granted them victory in battle. Reluctantly, Mack opened a communication channel to the Krull'thak embassy. "This is Mack Reynolds, Earth's cultural attaché. I'm inquiring about Gorr'magog's interest in Comic-Con." The screen flickered, revealing a Krull'thak diplomat whose multiple eyes blinked in asynchronous patterns. "Ah yes, Human Reynolds. The great Gorr'magog has observed your Comic-Con through galactic transmissions and finds it intriguing. It appears to be a gathering where humans dress as warriors, engage in ritualistic combat demonstrations, and trade sacred artifacts of power. Gorr'magog wishes to witness these battle customs and perhaps participate in your cosplay competitions. Mack blinked. Cosplay competitions? Yes. We understand these are combat rituals where the most impressively armored warrior receives honors. Gorr'magog has been practicing his, poses? The diplomat shifted, clearly uncomfortable. Also, he has developed an interest in something called Warhammer 40K. He finds your species' imagination for warfare charming. Mack felt a headache forming. And the weapons he's bringing? Merely ceremonial. Mostly ceremonial. We would consider it a grave insult if he were not allowed to carry them. After disconnecting, Mack immediately called Comic-Con's organizers. The conversation went about as well as expected. "Let me get this straight," said Elaine Matsuda, Comic-Con's director. "You want us to accommodate an actual alien war god at our event? Is this a publicity stunt?" "I wish it were," Mack sighed. "But no, this is deadly serious interstellar diplomacy. According to the Krull'thak, Gorr'magog has become fascinated with human pop culture, especially anything involving epic battles. And he's bringing weapons?" "Religious artifacts," Mack corrected automatically. "Look, if we refuse, we could potentially trigger an interstellar incident. The Council is very clear about respecting traditions." "Fine," Elaine finally conceded. "But you're handling security, and he's not allowed to actually eviscerate anyone, traditional or not." Mack hung up and immediately began drafting a request for additional security personnel. Something told him this Comic-Con was going to be one for the history books. The San Diego Convention Center was already a hive of frantic activity 3 days before Comic-Con when Mack arrived with his hastily assembled team. Captain Elena Rodriguez, head of the newly formed Extraterrestrial Security Division, walked beside him, scanning everything with the practiced eye of someone who had spent 20 years in military intelligence before being recruited for this particular nightmare. "Oh, let me understand the situation correctly," Rodriguez said, her voice surprisingly calm. "We have a deity, an actual deity, coming to Comic-Con, and our job is to make sure he doesn't start a holy war because someone asks him to pose for a selfie?" "That about sums it up," Mack nodded, though the Krull'thak insist Gorr'magog has been studying human customs and is quite excited about the event. Excited? A war god is excited about comic books? And apparently Warhammer 40K. He's a big fan of the aesthetic. Rodriguez muttered something that sounded suspiciously like a prayer. A flash of blue light announced the arrival of their third team member. Vextria, the Krull'thak-assigned cultural translator, materialized before them. Unlike most of her species, Vextria was only about 6 feet tall, with fewer limbs, a mere 4 arms instead of the usual 6 or more, and wore what appeared to be a human business suit, modified to accommodate her extra appendages. "Greetings, human Mack, human captain." Vextria's translator device rendered her clicks and hisses into cheerful English. "I have wonderful news. His divine terribleness has decided to participate fully in your cosplay tradition. He is creating a costume to wear over his divine form." Mack blinked. "He's cosplaying? As what? Something called a Space Marine chaplain?" He finds the skull helmet quite appealing. Rodriguez and Mack exchanged glances. "That's actually not the worst choice," Rodriguez admitted. "At least people will think it's just a really good costume." "How large is Gorr'magog exactly?" Mack asked. "In his current manifestation merely 12 feet tall," Vextra replied casually. "He can alter his form somewhat for comfort." 12 feet, Mack choked. "The doorways here are standard height." "How he can duck." Vextria waved a hand dismissively. "Now, about his ritual space. He requires an area to display his sacred artifacts and receive worshippers. We don't have worshippers here, Mack explained carefully. Just fans. They might ask for autographs or photos. Vextria's multiple eyes blinked in what might have been confusion. What is the difference between worship and fandom in human culture? Mack opened his mouth, then closed it. That's actually a good question. The next 48 hours were a blur of preparations. The convention center staff had to reinforce a section of the main hall floor to support Gorr'magog's weight. Special accommodations were made for his sacred artifacts, which, based on the security scans, were essentially alien weapons capable of destroying small buildings. Comic-Con organizers, initially horrified, had gradually shifted to a marketing mindset. Special guests, actual alien war deity, had been hastily added to promotional materials, with a disclaimer that ritual combat demonstrations are simulated only. The night before the convention, Mack sat in his hotel room, staring at the ceiling. This is either going to be the greatest diplomatic success in human history, he muttered to himself, or we're all going to die because someone makes a joke about Gorr'magog's costume. His communication implant chimed. Vextria's voice came through, sounding uncharacteristically nervous. Human Mack. His divine terribleness has just arrived in Earth orbit. He sends a message. I have brought additional sacred artifacts for trading. Do you know what these sacred artifacts might be? Mack closed his eyes. Please tell me he's not bringing more weapons. No. They appear to be collectible action figures, still in their original packaging. Mack couldn't help it. He started laughing. The line outside the San Diego Convention Center stretched for blocks, filled with humans in various states of costumed excitement. News of an actual alien deity attending had spread like wildfire, doubling attendance despite the emergency protocols put in place. Mack stood at the VIP entrance, flanked by Captain Rodriguez and 6 heavily armed but diplomatically labeled ceremonial guards. Vextria paced nervously, all 4 of her hands clutching different communication devices. His divine terribleness approaches, she announced, her translator barely keeping up with her excited clicks. Please remember, no sudden movements, no direct eye contact unless invited, and absolutely no flash photography. The last civilization that took uninvited pictures of Gorr'magog now exists only as a cautionary tale and a particularly scenic asteroid field. A low rumble shook the ground. Down the street, a massive transport vehicle, specially constructed for the occasion, rolled toward them. It looked like a cross between a tank and a parade float, decorated with skulls and alien symbols that seemed to writhe unpleasantly when viewed directly. Here we go, Mack muttered, straightening his tie. Captain, is your team ready? Rodriguez nodded grimly. As ready as anyone can be for a 12-foot war god attending a pop culture convention. The vehicle stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a hiss of hydraulics and a burst of what appeared to be actual hellfire, the side opened. Gorr'magog, the Eviscerator of Worlds, stepped out, and he was magnificent. Standing 12 feet tall, the deity wore a perfect, handcrafted Space Marine chaplain costume from Warhammer 40k, complete with skull helmet, ornate power armor, and a massive Crozius Arcanum that may or may not have been an actual weapon of mass destruction. 4 of his arms were visible, while his additional limbs were somehow concealed within the costume. Greetings, humans of the Comic-Con. His voice boomed without need of amplification, rattling windows blocks away. I come in peace to participate in your glorious battle celebrate. The crowd, after a moment of stunned silence, erupted in cheers. Mack stepped forward, bowing slightly. On behalf of Earth, I welcome you, Great Gorr'magog, to Comic-Con International. The massive helmet tilted down. Ea, the small diplomatic human. Your respect is noted and appreciated. One enormous hand reached into a compartment in his armor and pulled out a business card. I have prepared these contact cards, as is customary at your gatherings. I am told they facilitate networking." Mack accepted the card, which was the size of a dinner plate and seemed to be made of some kind of living metal. The text on it shifted between English and Krull'thak script. "Gorr'magog, divine destroyer, collector of rare figurines, enable for panels and ritual blessings." "This is very professional," Mack managed. "I have studied your customs," Gorr'magog stated proudly. "I understand that I must now proceed to my booth, where worshippers, forgive me, fans may approach with offerings and requests for signed artifacts." With surprising delicacy for a being his size, Gorr'magog stepped past them into the convention center. The doors, hastily modified the day before, still barely accommodated his bulk. Inside, the reaction was immediate. Phones came out, people gasped, a group of actual Space Marine cosplayers dropped to their knees in what might have been ironic worship but looked disconcertingly genuine. "This is going better than expected," Mack whispered to Rodriguez. "Don't jinx it," she replied, her hand never straying far from her sidearm. At his designated booth, a reinforced platform with a custom-built chair that looked suspiciously like a throne, Gorr'magog settled in and began interacting with the convention-goers. To everyone's surprise, he was unfailingly polite, if terrifyingly enthusiastic. "Your costume honors the blood god," he boomed at a nervous teenager dressed as an anime character, "though the sword should be held thus for maximum eviscation." He gently corrected the prop's position. "He's actually pretty good with the fans," Rodriguez admitted, as they watched from a safe distance. Dextria nodded proudly. "His divine terribleness has spent many cycles studying human entertainment. He particularly enjoys your unboxing videos and something called Critical Role." The morning proceeded with surprising smoothness. Gorr'magog signed autographs, his signature burned itself permanently into whatever surface he wrote on, posed for photos, though the images always came out slightly wrong, with extra limbs appearing where none should be, and displayed his collection of sacred artifacts, mostly mint-condition action figures that had collectors weeping with envy. Then came the announcement for the afternoon's main event, a staged fantasy battle reenactment in Hall H. His divine terribleness would be honored to observe this ritual combat, Vextria said excitedly. Mack and Rodriguez exchanged worried glances. "Maybe we should explain exactly what a reenactment is," Mack suggested. But Gorr'magog was already moving toward Hall H, the crowd parting before him like a sea before an impossibly large, heavily armored Moses. Hall H had been transformed into a fantasy battlefield for the highly anticipated Clash of Realms live-action roleplay event, a promotional stunt for an upcoming streaming series. Elaborate sets depicted a medieval village under siege, with actors in high quill armor preparing for battle. Gorr'magog sat in the front row, or rather, behind the front row, as no chair could accommodate him. He watched with increasing intensity as the actors took their positions, his multiple eyes glowing visibly through the eye holes of his Space Marine helmet. "The defensive formation is inadequate," he rumbled to Mack, who was sitting nervously beside him. "The flanks are exposed." "It's just for show," Mack whispered back. "They're not actually fighting." Curious. A battle rehearsal then? Something like that. The show began with dramatic music and artificial smoke. Two armies approached each other across the stage, one decked in gleaming good guy armor, the other in spiky evil regalia. As they clashed with choreographed precision, Gorr'magog leaned forward, his massive form tensing. Mack noticed with alarm that additional limbs were beginning to manifest through his costume. "Remember, this is entertainment," Mack whispered urgently. "Just pretend fighting." "I understand ritual combat," Gorr'magog replied. "We have similar traditions." The battle on stage intensified. An actor playing the villain delivered a dramatic killing blow to the hero's sidekick, who fell with an exaggerated death rattle. Gorr'magog stood up. "Dishonorable!" he roared. A true warrior grants a clean death. Before anyone could react, he leapt onto the stage, covering 30 feet in a single bound, and landed between the actors. The stage creaked ominously beneath him. "I shall demonstrate proper combat etiquette," he announced, as 2 additional arms emerged from his costume, each holding what appeared to be ceremonial weapons that hummed with otherworldly energy. Mack jumped to his feet. "Captain Rodriguez!" "On it!" Rodriguez was already sprinting toward the stage, hand to her earpiece, calling for backup. The actors froze in terror as Gorr'magog towered over them. The audience, unsure if this was part of the show, began recording with their phones. "For thousands of cyclists, I have overseen honorable combat. You mock the sacred traditions with your flimsy weapons and exaggerated deaths." Gorr'magog boomed, raising a glowing axe. Vextria scrambled onto the stage, her translator struggling to keep up with her panicked clicks. "Great One, this is their way. Their death acting is a form of art." "Art?" Gorr'magog paused, the axe still raised. "Explain." Mack finally reached the stage. "It's storytelling, your divine terribleness. We're not advanced enough to create actual hollow stories like the Krull'thak, so we act them out instead." Gorr'magog slowly lowered the axe. "Storytelling, yes. The Krull'thak have ancient traditions of combat narratives." He turned to the trembling actor who had played the villain. "Your deaths strike lack of conviction, but your costume design shows promise." Just then, 3 Galactic Council representatives materialized at the back of the hall, their formal robes fluttering despite the lack of wind. They pushed through the crowd with the entitled urgency of bureaucrats sensing a potential scandal. "Cultural Attaché Reynolds," the lead representative, a spindly blue humanoid, called out, "this display violates at least 17 council protocols regarding divine manifestations in public spaces." Mark's heart sank. This was exactly the sort of incident that could end with Earth being put on probation, or worse, having its council membership revoked. Gorr'magog turned his massive helmet toward the representatives. "Council members, you interrupt a cultural exchange." "Exchange?" the blue representative sputtered. "You were about to cleave that human in 2. I was offering constructive criticism on their battle choreography." The hall had fallen completely silent. Every eye, human and alien, was fixed on the confrontation unfolding on stage. Rodriguez stepped forward. "With all due respect, council representatives, under the Universal Respect for Cultural and Religious Traditions clause, Gorr'magog has every right to participate in our cultural events, including offering feedback." "Feedback that involves weaponry?" another representative countered. "Subhuman weaponry," Gorr'magog corrected, the weapons in question mysteriously disappearing back into his costume. "And I have greatly enjoyed your human Comic-Con, particularly the concept of Fana." To everyone's astonishment, he pulled out what appeared to be a sketchbook from a compartment in his armor. "I have created several Fantas of your human fictional characters engaged in glorious battle." The drawings, while anatomically questionable and occasionally featuring too many limbs, were surprisingly good. 3 hours later, Mack found himself in the convention center's largest meeting room, surrounded by Comic-Con organizers, Galactic Council representatives, Captain Rodriguez, Vextria, and Gorr'magog, who had removed his helmet to reveal a face that somehow contained too many features, arranged in an unsettling configuration. "So, to summarize," Mack said, maintaining his diplomatic tone through sheer force of will, there was no actual threat to human safety. His divine terribleness was simply enthusiastically participating. "Indeed." Gorr'magog nodded, causing several people to wince as the motion seemed to involve joints that shouldn't exist. "I came to Earth not for conquest, but for communion with fellow oppressors of battle narratives." The lead council representative looked skeptical. "The great Gorr'magog, Eviscerator of Worlds, came to Earth for comic books?" "Not murder comics," Gorr'magog corrected, "but all forms of human battle storytelling. Your species has an impressive imagination for warfare, considering your limited actual experience with interstellar combat. He reached into his armor again and produced what appeared to be a well-worn copy of The Art of War by Sun Tzu. This text, for example, primitive but insightful. I don't understand, one of the Comic-Con organizers said. You're a literal war deity. You've probably conquered actual planets. Why would our made-up stories interest you? Gorr'magog's expression shifted into something that might have been contemplative, if contemplation involved quite so many teeth. When you have existed for eons, actual combat becomes predictable. But your human imagination, your capacity to envision battles that never were, between beings that never existed, this is unique in my experience. He gestured toward his sketchbook. I have begun creating my own fan fiction. Mack choked slightly. You write fan fiction? 67 works currently published on your archive of our own planet. My unit is Gorgus, _destruction, _13. I specialize in epic battle sequences. The silence that followed was broken only when Vextria's translator glitched slightly from the effort of conveying her amused clicks. So, Mack said finally, you're telling us that the great war god of the Krull'thak came to Comic-Con as a fan? Is that so difficult to believe? Even deities are precity good storytelling. The council representatives huddled together, whispering furiously. Finally, the blue one stepped forward. In light of this unusual situation, we propose a modification to the Universal Respect for Cultural and Religious Traditions clause. When visiting other cultures, all beings, even deities, must submit detailed itineraries and purpose statements. That seems reasonable, Mack agreed quickly, though it diminishes the spontaneity of cultural exchange. Gorr'magog grumbled. I will accept these terms. In return, I would like to be invited back next year, perhaps as a feudal guest. I could lead a panel on authentic battle cries across the galaxy. By the final day of Comic-Con, Gorr'magog had become the event's unexpected star. His panel on divine perspectives on pop culture warfare was standing room only. His fan art commanded unprecedented attention, and several major publishers were in bidding wars for his original graphic novel concept, The 13th Limb, A Warrior's Tale. As Mack watched the war god carefully signing autographs with what appeared to be liquid fire, Captain Rodriguez sidled up beside him. You know what the irony is, she said. We were so worried about respecting his traditions that we never considered he might genuinely respect ours. Mack nodded. Turns out the universal language isn't math or music, it's nerding out about fictional battles. His communication implant chimed, a message from Ambassador Jenkins. Reynolds, excellent work with the Gorr'magog situation. The President is pleased. Unfortunately, we have a new situation developing. The Zorbi have expressed interest in attending something called Burning Man, something about void worship, and becoming one with temporary art installations. Handle it! Mack sighed and looked over at Gorr'magog, who was now enthusiastically explaining to a group of wide-eyed fans the anatomical inaccuracies in zombie decapitation scenes. You know what, Captain? He said. I think I'm getting the hang of this job after all.